Joanne Wilson, and this is Positively Gotham Gal. Real, honest, and meaningful conversations with women entrepreneurs about their approach to life, business, and everything in between.
All right, so I've known you a long time, actually. I think way back in the mouse days, right?
Yes.
The reason we're talking today is because we're talking about menopause.
Yeah.
So let's talk about menopause. And, I think one thing that's kind of interesting about menopause or periods or pregnancies
Mhm.
or, all these things that happen to women, no one ever talks about them.
Ever. I mean, it's sort of insane.
But like even friends don't talk about it.
Until you start sharing a story, then you realize, so many other kind of gals in your little nucleus have all had so many shared experiences. Like, I mean, I remember when I reached out to you about Let's Talk Menopause, we bonded over UTIs, which was totally random. Like
And by the way, I found the most unbelievable urologist.
I go to her.
Oh,
She back.
okay, so fine. I'm not going to chew back now. I'm going to another woman
Okay.
who that's all she does.
Oh, interesting.
I'll send you her information. Women who have problems with UTIs, postmenopausal, the whole thing. And I keep saying to her, like, and I love chew back, but when I came back, I decided to try this other woman. And I keep saying to her, oh my God, you're amazing. And she's like, this is what I do.
Right, this is my jam.
Like, this is my thing. It's my small thing. I'm an individual practitioner. I was like, but I've been looking for you for 4 years.
Right.
So do you think that women are starting to talk about this more?
I think so. I mean, slowly. I mean, look, one of the reasons why we started this, this new national nonprofit was to begin to make some inroads. It's like Rome wasn't built in a day. Like I remember when I worked for Chris Quinn, we didn't even have a lactation room for myself and my other friends who were off having babies and coming back to work, and we needed a place to nurse. And so, I think we're evolving over time. We're still behind the 8 ball compared to the UK and Australia.
And what do they do different down there?
I think they're not afraid of anything. Like there is no taboo. Like I'm married to a Brit, and I remember the first time, like we ended up, talking about my sister, coming out of the closet after being married, and he's like, what's the story like with people being gay and lesbian in the United States? Like he's like, here across the river and across the pond, nobody gives a shit. Like he's like, you are who you are. And I feel like, when it comes to like menopause and like, pregnancy and menstruation, they just kind of like talk about everything as if it's just a regular kind of dinner table, conversation.
Well, you think about Britain, right? I mean, they've been around a long time.
Yeah.
And then Australians, they were jailbirds from Britain.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes sense, right? We're a young country.
It totally makes sense. And so like we're still kind of, evolving, over time with all of these, just basic kind of natural health, chapters. But we are seeing, pretty dramatic like uptick with our programs. We have two great, amazing, partners, Hello Rebel and Alloy Health. And so I think together, like by joining forces, like our monthly menopause talk series, we've had a huge increase of women who have been listening in to those, conversations, and they're just super dynamic, user friendly. They're not obtuse, like they're incredible, doctors and mental health experts that are now making sense for people about the whole puzzle, going on.
Right.
But I think it all takes time. It's not going to happen like, instantaneously. We have more influencers like Stacey London who are, very outspoken, and I think who are just, amazing, in the space that help us to reach more, women from all different, socioeconomic, backgrounds.
Well, I think that's the thing that's interesting. I talked to a gentleman yesterday who runs Generation USA, and he's
Mhm.
incredible. And he was saying when he went off to school, I mean, he's my age, he didn't know about all these programs that were available to him.
Mhm.
And now, fast forward, and you think to yourself as like someone who's been involved, and you have, I mean, you've had such a long history in social services, public service, and you think, oh my God, why is there still a digital
Right.
divide? Or
Mhm.
why are Black and brown kids in underserved areas not know the ones that are super smart, they can get a full ride here? Like, why is that still going on?
It's yeah, it makes no sense. And I will say the thing that's really interesting, with perimenopause and menopause is, the whole health equity conversation. It's sort of like almost like, okay, now the joke is on us. Like now, I mean, not that we're in the same boat in terms of like resources, because we as white affluent women, we still have more access to find the right doctors, even if it takes us 4 years or 6 years. But across the board, the access to, trained menopause doctors doesn't exist, because less than 8%. So literally, if you're, in a socioeconomic, deprived neighborhood that barely has access to a regular gynecologist versus, living in an affluent part of town in the United States, it doesn't really, I mean, it matters, but in terms of access to a great doctor, we're all in a very similar boat, because the funding's just not there.
That's
So,
very true. I mean, I will say, like, as you go back, like, I think of my daughters when they had their period versus when I had my period. Like, I
mhm,
didn't tell anybody. I mean, everyone knew because, like, your first period wasn't necessarily a tampon,
right.
although for my girls, it was like, do not wear anything else but a tampon. But, like, I brought my little purse to school. Like, I never take a purse to school. And of course, everyone
Right.
knew. But, like,
Yeah.
my daughters were just like, sharing with their friends, and they were all in the bathroom together like it was an exciting moment. I was like, when did this happen? This is
Right. Because it didn't happen. Yeah.
awesome. And then when I even remember a friend of mine who said something to me, and she's 10 years my senior, she was talking about sex and how when after menopause and all this, and I was like, well, what about this? She's, oh, just wait. And that was the comment.
Right. But nothing more.
And I'm
Right.
thinking, okay, well, why do I have to wait 10 years? Why can't you tell me now?
Right. Right. I mean, it takes like that's the other thing. It's like every minute you're learning like, like something new. Like I didn't know it was like 4 to 10 years of like perimenopause before you actually like reach, menopause. Like I was joking, like I thought I was literally about to approach menopause. I had missed 7 months of periods and I was like, whew, I'm almost in the home stretch. And then 2 weeks ago I got my period and I was like, fuck. I was like, because now I have to start all over again, counting the months and using our symptoms tracker from our website, which I now use because like we are not having any more babies, and so like
Yeah, I mean, it's a major thing. And the other thing is that, I mean, God, if my mother used to be, oh, it sucks getting old. And it's like, okay, can you share? Like, yeah, your skin gets dry and all this stuff. But, when you talk about underserved communities versus even wealthy communities, there are so few
right.
doctors that actually are attuned to this. I mean, as we talked before a long time ago, which is I went to 3 or 4 urologists.
Mhm.
One man finally, like, literally didn't even want to look at me. He didn't know what to do with me. He's like, oh, there's this one doctor that she kind of like deals with other women,
Like it's some stigma or
like,
something.
with these issues and like UTIs and sex. Do you want to see her? And I'm like, well, considering that you're not even like getting next to me, yeah,
Right.
it's just like you want nothing to do with me.
I mean, it's actually like remarkable. Like we have this one amazing doctor, Dr. Rachel Rubin out of DC, who's on our advisory board, who specializes in urology and sexual health. And for her, like one of the biggest things is just the exam itself. Like they're not most untrained doctors, like the doctor that you just mentioned, are not doing an appropriate vaginal exam to even know what is going on with the woman.
To get you appropriate quick care.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so, like, they spend 5 minutes and then they're like, "Okay, you're out the door," in terms of, like, what's going on.
Well, that unfortunately is happening in medicine as a whole, right? Which is why it's becoming so decentralized, and which I do like those medical facilities, you're just like, oh, I'm sick, I'm going to go down the street and see what they can give me. Like, I think the urgent cares are awesome, but even when you go to your doctors, they don't make any money unless you're paying for your own care, and you have a doctor that's only yours on call 24/7. And literally, they're on the watch because they make money through insurance, and the insurance companies are defensive, not offensive. I mean, so
Right. No, of course.
the whole
Yeah.
entire industry makes zero sense whatsoever.
It's just like this vicious cycle of, it's.
And if someone actually stood back and fixed it, it wouldn't cost as much as it does.
Yeah, and I think that's true for the workplace too. I mean, there have been, from Forbes to, Bloomberg, it's literally $1 billion, industry. But even forget about like at home or in the doctor's office, even in the workplace, nobody's really talking about perimenopause and menopause. So, a woman at 38 could be, doing an amazing, job in her executive position. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, things start to change, because of her estrogen and her hormones. She doesn't know what's going on with her body. Workplace has no idea what's going on. And they just all of a sudden like plague her as not being an adequate person, as part of the team or the company, anymore. And people are leaving, positions, a lot throughout, the country and even overseas.
That's interesting.
And that is a place, yeah, that, I mean, England is doing like a pretty deep dive around menopause in the workplace. And that's sort of like our next, chapter for next year that we want to do a deeper dive on.
That's an interesting thing because, we're all living to be much older.
Much
We're gonna,
older.
and no one, if you retire at, what is it, 62, like you could have 30 or 40 years left. I mean,
Yeah,
thinking about making the
absolutely.
money, it's like, what do you do to keep yourself entertained all day? I
Right.
mean, for me, I would lose my marbles. Like, I am curious. I like doing things. I like, starting
Of
things,
course.
building things.
Yeah.
But it is a factor. And listen, even in the workplace, I mean, I remember my mother being in her, I don't know what age she was, but she was not a young chick. And she was like, I need to get a facelift. Of course, they didn't have Botox back then and all the other wonderful things that you can do that aren't invasive. But she's like, she ran her own company. She was, had an ad agency. She had several, I mean, lots of clients. She had a serious business. She's like,
Right.
I
She was
can't look like I'm an old lady. I have to look like you don't know how old I am.
right. And that us, I have to say, like, and we have that now, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Like, and the whole anti-aging, like pharmaceutical and cosmetic. I'm like, no, we should just be aging gracefully and like, brown hair, gray hair, blonde hair, black hair, whatever. Like I think, we should just all be aging, and this should just really be like the best, chapter of our life. But the whole
Yeah.
anti just drives me like that.
It drives me crazy too.
Like it's such
And
bullshit.
we can just go back to what it always is. It's the media. It's always the media.
Right.
And it's also, you know, what makes capitalism, right? So it's a huge business
Yeah.
to keep us all looking fresh and healthy. So what was it that like got you they're like, okay, well, I mean, listen, you've always been in public service, so it wasn't shocking to me that you were starting your own nonprofit, of course, nonprofit, social service, helping people in underserved communities versus others like that you're partnering with that are private profit businesses. What was it that was that, all right, we got to do something about this?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think it was a combination of like my own journey of like not knowing at all, like during the pandemic, of having nearly 6 months of chronic UTIs and was just in dire pain. And it wasn't until my friend, Donna, who's been a friend of mine, who's now my co-founder of Let's Talk Menopause, she was like, I think you're in perimenopause. And I was sort of like, what? I was like, what does chronic UTIs have to do with, perimenopause? She's like, oh, it's one of the biggest symptoms. My gynecologist from Manhattan, even though she wouldn't see me person, she never mentioned, perimenopause. And after seeing a third doctor, finally they would have a conversation with me. But it became like this aha moment. I was like, okay, we have to do something. And Donna was already starting to like think about like founding this new nonprofit with our other co-founder, Christine. And they really wanted my help with strategy about how to actually set up a nonprofit. And I was like, so, all right, here's the deal. If I'm going to get involved, we have to go big or I'm going home. Like if this is just for like your college friends and like our next door neighbors to learn about menopause, from like our homes, like no thanks. And they were like, okay. Like, so then they were sort of like, so then we kind of like dove in, and we went pretty big as a very early kind of startup nonprofit, but that felt more meaningful for me. Like while I'm on several other boards, I've never been the board chair and a co-founder or something, but this seemed like just too important, not to really kind of invest, my time and kind of self in, because I realized I was like, okay, so if I'm in this boat, and then there's thousands, if not millions, of other women across the corners of the country who are having the same stuff that I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And we have to get loud about it, and we have to do something, about it. So
I mean, there's so many things that happen to women that men don't have those issues. Obviously, I don't know if they have other issues. And you can go on like the medical sites, and you can do Dr. Google and
right,
try to figure out at least the verbiage, so that when you go into a doctor's office, you know what to ask and what to
right,
say,
exactly.
which is worthy of something,
It
right?
is really worthy, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do is arm women with more knowledge about the symptoms so that they can start tracking those and having more confident conversations, but also building the storytelling in the community so that people don't feel like they are alone. People feel like, okay, they have other gals or guys that they can actually just have a chit chat with about what's going on and not feel like they're alone. Because there's the physical and the mental health, but then there's just life, and it's like this big chapter from 40 to 60 years old, and so it's not like
And there's totally different things for different women. I mean,
exactly, yeah,
some women need to use estrogen, some can't use estrogen because they
hmm
have BRCA or they've had cancer. But I mean, someone described to me that I was talking to in a podcast, it's like you put moisture on your skin, but you don't put moisture in your vagina. But if
right,
you're having all these problems in post menopause or during menopause, you do have to. And those products generally have estrogen in them. But if you have cancer, can I do that? How does
right,
that absorb through the blood, or how does it absorb through my body? And is it okay?
exactly,
And all these questions. And there's really,
right, and hormone replacement therapy, all
right,
of these
all these
things.
things. And there's no information. And so, um, and the hot flashes, I mean, everyone is different.
Everyone's different. Like I mean, I have not really. I've had one like super crazy hot flash, but it's not a regular occurrence for me. But I have a close friend who's literally every night she's like sweating and like she wakes up and she's like in a soaking wet bed, and so everybody goes through different symptoms.
Everyone's different. Yeah.
It's not one size fits all. And it's interesting, even like in the philanthropy world, like when I'm out kind of fundraising, I'll talk to some friends and they're like, well, I didn't really have any symptoms, but here's a few because I like you, I'll make a donation. And then other people like to talk about, for 3 hours about like their painful, journey. And they say, we wish we had Let's Talk Menopause like 20 years ago when we were not, when we were going through it. So it's an interesting conversation because we're the first of its kind. It's not like a regular philanthropy conversation to have, with foundations and and donors. And so, but we're slowly, we're kind of breaking into some good traction, in that
Well,
front.
it is, a best in class for particularly women
Yeah.
that many of them who, even if they do have insurance and don't have time, even in
Right.
terms of like, okay, now I got to see another doctor, another doctor, another doctor. I mean, the
Exactly.
one thing that
Mhm.
is very unique about New York that I have found just talking to people and friends across the country is New York doctors are very aggressive, right? In
Yes.
regards to, oh, you actually are 5 points higher than you were last year when we took your blood pressure. So you're going to go see this doctor
Right.
and they're going to look at you so we can make sure. And, on one hand, I mean, every woman I know is like, oh, I'm going for my annual checkup. God knows how many doctors I'm going to see afterwards,
Right.
you know.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, you do feel control of your body. and you know what's happening. And
Yeah, like I always feel better like if that, happens, to know that it is a little bit more aggressive and, you know, more comprehensive,
yeah, no, and it should be. I mean, this is such a thing that affects women in ways that, I mean, I was having hot flashes to the point where I wasn't sleeping at night. I was like bumping into walls, and
I
I
mean,
was
it's
just like,
debilitating.
it was debilitating. And finally, I was like, okay, I got to take Ambien, I got to take something. And I was like, this is not a long term solution, you
Right.
know,
No, but you can't take that, yeah, from the
forever.
outside
I mean,
in.
people do, but I had no interest in doing
Right.
that.
Fred would have
And
been like, "What's going on?"
yeah, I mean, it's just like, but I'd wake up because it was like literally a jolt out of nowhere, and then I'd be like, okay, now I can't get back to sleep, and it sucked. And now, of course, I have a lot more knowledge, and I've educated myself on the
Yeah, and
issue.
it's like radiant heat. So, I mean, I was actually with my son Jackson, and I we were like rearranging our like Brooklyn apartment. He's like, "Mom, I think we're doing like too much," and I was like, "No, no, no, it's fine. It's like over the holidays, like we'll get it done." And then like 15 minutes later, I like it was radiant heat coming like everywhere. And he was like, "Okay, mom, I really think you need to take a break. I'm getting you a glass of water." He's like, "I don't know what's going on," but and I was like, "I think mommy's having like her official like hot flash." Because I was like, "This is no joke. This is not like
No, it's no
like
joke.
like because it's not. It's like everywhere."
It's everywhere. And I hope in the next 10 years, I mean, medicine is so changing so quickly. It is mind boggling that technology is now making those inroads. Like, I was really sick this past year. I ended up in the hospital. And again, all connected to this. I had a UTI I didn't know about. And there were other things that came along with menopause, whereas you're not releasing your urine and you don't even know it. And all of a sudden, I got a massive kidney infection, which I
Oh
didn't
my
really
goodness,
know. And 104 fever, ended up in the hospital,
I'm so sorry for
sepsis,
that.
right? They didn't know what was wrong with me, whatever. And eventually, they found other things that the reason that I probably got so sick so quickly. But what was amazing to me, they put me in a COVID tent. Of course, I was the only one in it because it was over. So I
Right.
was in this huge COVID tent. And they came to take a chest x ray. Now, you think about that in the past, if you've ever had one, you lie down and you stand up and they have all
Right.
this stuff. This guy rolls in a cart. I'm in this, like sitting in this bed waiting in the COVID tent.
And the COVID
The
tent.
COVID tent. He goes, okay, put this behind your back, and was like, square thing. He goes,
Right.
okay, great. And he walks over to this cart, and he's like, we're going to take a chest x ray. Click.
That's it?
That's it. And I was like, oh my God.
When are they gonna get that for, like, your brain? I mean, I knock wood, I used to suffer from really horrible menstrual migraines, and every other year I'd have to go for an MRI, and I kept saying, "When is the technology gonna advance?" Because it feels like you have a meat grinder, like, around your head. It's like you can't get out of it soon enough because it's
Wow.
just it's I mean, there's nothing that you can relax. Some people, I guess, do take, like a sleeping pill or something. But
I mean, MRIs have changed. I mean, I know like Ezra, which is a full body scan. I mean, it only takes an hour, right? I mean, I know that sounds like a lot, but it was an hour and a half 2 years before.
right, so that's actually an improvement.
It's
So
an improvement,
yeah,
right? So, which is pretty cool.
fortunately, my migraines have like they've stopped over the last like year, which is sort of like another small miracle.
Oh my God, thank God. Maybe that was because of menopause.
Well, that's what my gynecologist actually said. She's like, if you're slowing down your menstrual cycle, it's not a surprise that you're not having crazy headaches anymore.
That's
So
amazing, right? I mean, they still don't really understand the female body. I mean, up to what? When? Not that long ago, is that heart, everything, right? That was looked at from the male perspective of really like,
right, even to this day, people still think heart disease is much more prevalent in men, but that's why they call it the deadly killer for women. It's
yeah,
it's many more women are having heart disease than men actually. So
totally. So, what is your thought process in regards to where do you want this to go? Like, I know you're doing PSA campaigns, correct?
We are, yeah. So we're in conversation right now. We're gonna have hopefully more exciting news next week with a global company that we're gonna be launching a partnership with. And so we are gonna double down and triple down on all of our programs. And so our PSA and our public ad campaign will begin to go national to hit several other urban cities throughout the United States, which is really exciting.
That's fantastic. Any particular city or just
So we're looking right now in California, Houston, Chicago, Philadelphia is probably, likely kind of the big 4 or 5, cities on top of New York City. So those are the big, markets that are important to us, also important to our new partner. We're also going to start community health partnerships, launching with Women in Need, which is the group that Chris Quinn is the president and CEO of.
very cool.
Kristen, who's on our advisory board, and she's been, so excited. We will do a pilot project with Win, both in person and virtually,
I love that.
with women living in their supportive housing and in their shelters. About 35% of the constituents that they serve are in perimenopausal and menopause age range. And so that's going to be great. So we want to kind of replicate that pilot project in other, major big cities and smaller cities, with other, like-minded, nonprofits who are serving low-income women who really don't have access. And my sense is the mental health aspect is probably so much more acute. Having, our services and having, our best in class like doctors to help is really, I think, important and just, exciting, to me because, they have like the world on their shoulders. The majority of them are single moms. They're working, raising their children, all with scarce, services, depending on the city that they in. And so, they're and so this is like one opportunity that we can really kind of lean into and work together. And then our podcast, which we're so excited about, called Hello Menopause, which is being curated and produced by a great company called Frequency. That's going to launch in the fall. And so we're super excited about that. We are just recording our final guest. So it's about 14 episodes. And it's really exciting. And it's all about storytelling. So all of our guests have had to have their own personal story with menopause. So we have like Nina Collins, and we have Stacey London and Tamsin Fidel, and a whole host of other, great gals.
That's amazing.
And then we're just going to continue on with our menopause talks. And in the fall, we're hoping to do a symposium all about mood, sleep, and mental health, probably a half-day symposium in New York City, where we'll have some kind of salon-style workshops and a bigger, kind of, audience all in person.
That's great. I mean, the one thing that I've found about women over the years is that women need to be validated.
Yes.
And so even for women who are, even living in NYCHA, I mean, 15% of people in the city live in public housing. And of those people, how many of them are perimenopausal? I don't know the
Yeah,
answer. But to know that they could watch a podcast or listen to this or get online and say, oh my God, I am not the only one this is happening to.
exactly.
That alone changes the game, right? Because when you talk about mental health, if you're like having like a hot flash freak and you're having them like
Right.
12 times a day and you literally can't function, to be able to know that like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me, right? I'm not the only one having hot
Exactly.
flashes, or right, I'm not the only one who continues to get UTIs. It's obviously something that has to do with my body changing.
Right, and the irritability and, forgetfulness, it's not all of a sudden you didn't just become kind of a crazy person,
Right,
you're
right. Or you're losing your mind. No. And so I think that is what's great. And I love that you have decided, I mean, it's not shocking again, you've always been in public service, but you've thought about how this, in many ways, a new medical space that has been ignored forever, even though this has happened for thousands of years, to take into a different level, instead of, as we're seeing all these women who are creating businesses that are specifically medical spaces for women, which have been terrifically successful, is taking that to women that are underserved and don't have that kind of either ability to get in front of other doctors or just the right health care, or
Exactly.
they're in areas of the country where they have no connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we think about, the Michael J. Fox, like Parkinson's Foundation, or what's happening with NARAL and Planned Parenthood, especially those two groups, because I've talked to, many friends who have been on their board. Once you get past child rearing age, they don't talk at all about perimenopause, and menopause. It's not really part of their mission and focal point. And so then we kind of just fall off this like cliff. And while there is, the National Menopause, Society, that's really a medical society.
Mm-hmm.
So unless you're a doctor, you would never know to go to the NAMS, website. And they're incredible about what they do. But with our site, it really is like this great interaction for women, for practitioners, for educators, for all different, women going through all different walks of life.
Yeah, I mean, you should have signs in every single emergency room or medical facility across the country. I mean, all you have to do is get on your site
Right.
and start doing the work, and it's all there. I assume that you're going to start linking to doctors, and or you already have that.
We are. Eventually, we want to start, having our symptoms posters and our trackers, in as many doctor's offices, as we can. Eventually, we'll have a staff. Right now, we are like pretty much 100% volunteer, run. We have great consultants that are helping us, on the media front and the podcast front. But I'm pretty confident in the next, year and change, we'll actually be able to like hire a social media manager and a full-time, manager to help, run the day-to-day.
It's great. Listen, I love what you're doing. I think that
Thank you.
the importance of having these conversations. I mean, like I just think about, little kids like, ew, mom, that's so gross. It's like, actually it's not,
It's
it's like,
not.
it's not like we all have bodies, we all have sex, women all get their periods,
Right,
everyone's got their own shtick. Like, who cares?
right. And now it's like, and that, it's like my son is now versed in like what's going on. And even my husband, and I will say it's kind of interesting because more men have actually, not that the women haven't been excited, but we haven't, not everyone has been like over the moon like you have been, but the men, I will say, have been, remarkably really excited about this because they are like thanking us. They're like, oh, maybe we'll now learn how to talk to our wives or our partners, and we'll understand better about what actually is going on, like in our dysfunctional family sometimes, like, and actually putting the puzzle, together. So they really want to kind of learn what's going on, like, with
That's
their
interesting.
spouses. So it's been really
Yeah.
interesting.
Oh, women are survivors. I mean, you got to get up, you got to go to work, you got to be the mother, you
Yep.
got to do what you got to do. And, if you've got hot flashes or you feel like shit or you have an infection, you're just like, get meds, move on, do what you got to do.
Right. It
And
doesn't matter.
so
You still have to,
you
yeah,
still have to
do all this
function in
stuff.
the day-to-day business. And so, knowing and just realizing you're not the only one out there and you can help yourself, I think is just tremendous.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming on. This is like, one of the topics we've talked about a couple times on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Anyway, well, thanks, Samara.
Thank you, Joanne.
And I'm looking forward to seeing, those huge boards across the
Yes.
city.